The bandage on her cheek should have been just another detail Lord Dakota overlooked. Another invisible mark on an invisible human who scrubbed his marble floors in the twilight hours. But when Annabelle's breath caught at the sound of his approaching footsteps, something ancient and feral stirred inside him. A possessiveness he hadn't felt in 3 centuries of immortal existence. He'd sentenced vampires to eternal darkness for less than the terror he saw flickering in those mortal brown eyes. "Who did this to you?" His voice was deadly quiet, the same tone he used before passing judgment on traitors. Annabelle's fingers trembled against the purple bruise peeking from beneath the white gauze. Her pulse thundered. He could hear it, smell the fear mixing with her blood. "Nobody, my lord. I fell." Dakota stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back. That small movement, that reflexive retreat from him, ignited something that had nothing to do with the crown he'd inherited or the vampire court he ruled with calculated precision. For the first time since ascending to power, Lord Dakota felt completely, terrifyingly out of control. "Don't lie to me," he whispered, and the ancient stones of the Crimson Court seemed to hold their breath. Annabelle had served in Lord Dakota's castle for 8 months without truly seeing him. He was a presence, dark velvet robes, silent footsteps, the scent of night-blooming jasmine, and old blood that lingered in corridors after he passed. She knew the important things. He demanded perfection, never tolerated mistakes, and expected humans to be as invisible as ghosts. Invisibility was Annabelle's specialty. 23 years of servitude had taught her how to move through vampire spaces without disturbing the shadows. She folded herself smaller in hallways, quieted her breathing when immortals spoke, perfected the art of being present without being noticed. Today, that careful invisibility shattered. She'd covered the wound as best she could, stolen powder from the servants' quarters, because humans weren't provided such luxuries, a bandage torn from bed linens to hide the worst of the damage. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Kalin, would have her whipped if she appeared before the court looking unseemly, but the evening meal wouldn't prepare itself, and the eastern corridor wouldn't scrub its own bloodstains. So Annabelle bent to her work, hoping the vampire king would pass by as he always did, unseeing, uncaring, unaware. She was wrong. If this tale pulled you into the shadows this moment, don't slip away just yet. Tap like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your presence here keeps the story alive. Dakota's fingers drummed against the obsidian council table, the rhythm precise and irritated. Around him, 5 ancient vampires debated bloodline purity and political alliances with the enthusiasm of wolves circling fresh meat. The Queen Selection, they called it. A circus, he thought, designed to bind him to someone's daughter, someone's niece, someone's carefully groomed political weapon. "Lord Dakota, if I may." Kayvon's voice grated like stone on bone. "The Lady Lena's family controls the Eastern Territories. A union would strengthen borders I've held without marriage for 50 years. Dakota's interruption was surgical. "Your point." The council fell silent. Outside the stained glass windows, night pressed against the Crimson Court like a living thing. He should care about this. The selection ceremony was 3 weeks away. 5 vampire ladies, each more accomplished, more powerful, more suitable than the last, were already residing in the castle's guest wings, undergoing the traditional purification rituals. Lena, with her silver tongue and sharper ambitions. Danica, whose family's military strength could crush uprisings before they began. Naili, beautiful and ruthless as winter. Avery, whose political acumen rivaled his own, and Kayvon's niece, whose name Dakota kept forgetting because she smiled too much for someone raised in darkness. He should care, but all he could see was trembling fingers against white gauze, brown eyes wide with fear that tasted like copper on the back of his tongue. "Nobody, my lord. I fell." The lie had been almost perfect. Almost. "My lord," Deshawn's voice pulled him back. His most trusted advisor wore concern like an unfamiliar coat. "Are you well?" "Fine." Dakota stood, the scrape of his chair against marble too loud in the vaulted chamber. "Continue without me. Choose whichever alliance you prefer. I'll wear the crown and sign the documents regardless." He left before they could protest, his footsteps echoing through corridors that had witnessed 3 centuries of vampire rule. Servants scattered at his approach, humans pressing themselves against walls, making themselves small, forgettable, the way she had. Dakota found himself in the servants' wing without conscious decision, a place kings had no business being. He stopped a young human male carrying linens, Elvin, his mind supplied, though he'd never bothered learning their names before. "The maid who serves the eastern corridor. Dark hair, quiet. What's her name?" Elvin's heart rate spiked beautifully. My lord, there are several. The one with the bandage." Dakota's patience was gossamer thin. "On her face." "Annabelle, my lord." The words tumbled out quickly. "Annabelle. I don't know her family name. She keeps to herself mostly. Been here, maybe 8 months?" Dakota released him with a dismissive gesture, watching the human flee like prey, finally freed from a predator's gaze. Annabelle. The name settled in his chest like a blade he couldn't remove. Somewhere in the castle's guest wings, 5 vampire ladies prepared for courtship rituals, each one a perfect choice for a king who valued power over everything else. And all Dakota could think about was a human maid whose name he'd just learned, whose fear he could still taste, whose lie had been transparent as morning mist. Who hurt you? He would find out. And then someone would learn exactly why even other vampires feared the Lord of the Crimson Court. The formal dining hall glittered with calculated opulence, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across faces that hadn't aged in centuries. Dakota sat at the head of the table, flanked by his potential brides, each positioned according to bloodline status and political weight. Lena spoke of trade routes with practiced charm. Danica laughed at something Kayvon said. The sound sharp as breaking glass. Nayeli's crimson gown matched her lips, matched the wine none of them actually needed to drink. Avery observed everything with eyes too clever by half. Dakota heard none of it. His attention tracked a figure moving along the room's perimeter, dark uniform, careful steps, a white bandage stark against brown skin. Annabelle served with the mechanical precision of someone who'd learned that efficiency meant invisibility. She refilled glasses that weren't empty, adjusted silverware that didn't need adjusting, existed in the spaces between conversations, without disturbing the air. Until Lena's glass slipped. It wasn't an accident. Dakota's 3 centuries of reading violence told him that. The crystal struck the marble floor with theatrical timing, red wine spreading like fresh blood across white stone. "Clumsy human." Lena's voice carried just enough volume. "Clean it. Now." Annabelle moved immediately, kneeling, reaching for the shattered glass. "Look at me when I address you." The command froze Annabelle mid-motion. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, and Dakota saw what he'd missed before. Not submission. Survival strategy. the careful calculation of someone who'd learned exactly how much defiance preceded punishment. "My apologies, my lady." Annabelle's voice was steady, despite the pulse hammering in her throat. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Lena's smile was poisonous honey. "Lord Dakota values orderliness in his household. Don't you, my lord?" Every vampire at the table turned to him, waiting for affirmation of the hierarchy they all understood. Human servants were furniture, replaceable, beneath notice. Dakota's silence stretched too long. "The glass slipped from your hand, Lady Lena." His voice was quiet, conversational, deadly. "Perhaps you should be more careful with things that break easily." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lena's smile faltered. Around the table, the other suitors recalculated their strategies with visible speed. Kayvon's expression could have curdled blood. Dakota stood, the scrape of his chair a punctuation mark. "Annabelle, my study requires attending. Come." He didn't wait to see if she followed, but he heard her footsteps, hesitant, confused, trailing behind him through corridors that grew quieter as they left the dining hall's politics behind. His study was all dark wood and darker secrets. Shelves lined with books older than most countries. Dakota closed the door, heard her heartbeat spike. "You're not in trouble." He kept his back to her, giving her space, trying to remember how to be something other than threatening. "I want the truth, not the version you think will keep you safe. Who hurt you?" "My lord, I told you. You lied." He turned and she flinched. The movement made something crack inside his chest. "And before you lie again, understand something. I've built this court on recognizing deception. Your fear, I can smell it. Your heartbeat, I can hear it. The bruise under that bandage, I can see the handprint, even through the gauze." Annabelle's hand moved unconsciously to her cheek. "So I'll ask once more, and this time, trust that I'm more dangerous to whoever hurt you than I am to you." He stepped closer, slowly, the way one might approach something wounded. "Who did this?" Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. "One of the ladies didn't like how I looked at you." Deshawn found Dakota in the armory at dawn, which was never a good sign. The vampire king stood before a wall of blades, each one baptized in blood, older than memory. "You called for me, my lord?" "I need you to investigate something." Dakota didn't turn from the weapons. "Quietly, the human staff, find out who's been hurting them, how long it's been happening, who knows and says nothing." Deshawn's silence lasted 3 heartbeats too long. "My lord, humans injure themselves regularly. Their fragility is not an excuse for cruelty within my house." Dakota's voice could have frozen fire. "Do you have a problem with this assignment?" "No, my lord." Deshawn bowed, but his expression carried questions he was too wise to voice. "I'll begin immediately." The investigation took less than a day to bear fruit, and the fruit was rotten. A human servant named Emerson was found at the base of the eastern stairs, neck broken, eyes still open in permanent surprise. The castle physician, a vampire who'd seen centuries of death, ruled it accidental almost immediately. "He fell," the physician said, not meeting Dakota's eyes. "Humans are clumsy creatures. The stairs are steep." Dakota stood over the body, studying the bruising pattern on the throat. "He fell backward?" "My lord?" "The injury suggests he was facing away from the stairs when he fell. Tell me how one falls up a staircase." Dakota crouched, tilting the dead man's head. "And these marks on his neck, they look remarkably like fingers." The physician swallowed audibly. Perhaps I was mistaken in my initial assessment. Perhaps you were complicit." Dakota stood, and 2 guards materialized from shadows. "Detain him, gently. I have questions about what else he's been mistaken about." By nightfall, Deshawn's report painted a picture that made Dakota's ancient blood sing with rage. Systematic intimidation. Servants who'd witnessed inappropriate behavior among the nobility, silenced through fear or worse. A network of cruelty so normalized that even the humans accepted it as natural order. And at the center, testimony from 3 terrified servants. Lady Lena's name kept surfacing like a corpse refusing to stay buried. "Bring Annabelle to my personal quarters," Dakota ordered. "Reassign her duties. She serves only me now, under my direct protection." "My lord," Deshawn's voice carried warning. "The suitors will interpret this as favoritism. The council will remember who wears the crown." Dakota's smile was all fangs. "And the suitors will learn that what's mine stays mine. Is that unclear?" "No, my lord." "Good. And Deshawn, increase security around the human quarters. Anyone who touches my staff answers to me personally." The word spread through the Crimson Court like wildfire through dry timber. The king had claimed a human, not for feeding. He'd never shown interest in that particular intimacy. Not for pleasure, though whispers suggested otherwise, but for protection. Lady Danica cornered Dakota in the council chamber, her expression somewhere between amusement and contempt. "A human maid, my lord? Really? If you wanted a pet, the castle has breeding programs for companions far more suitable. I don't recall asking for your opinion on my household management." "No, but I'm offering it freely." She circled him like a predator assessing prey. "You're supposed to be choosing a queen. Instead, you're playing protector to livestock. It makes you look weak. It makes you look distracted. Then perhaps you should question whether you want to be queen to someone you consider weak." Danica's laugh was genuine surprise. "Careful, my lord. I'm starting to think you might actually be interesting." That night, Annabelle arrived at his chambers carrying fresh linens, her movements stiff with confusion and fear. The bandage was gone, revealing the full damage. A handprint bruised into her cheek in shades of purple and yellow. Dakota's hands clenched into fists. "You asked about the bandage again," Annabelle said quietly. "This time, I'll tell you the truth." Annabelle's hands twisted in her apron as she stood in the center of Dakota's chambers, a space more luxurious than anywhere she'd ever been allowed to exist. Moonlight spilled through arched windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. "I was sold here," she began, voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. 3 years ago, my father owed debts to a vampire merchant, gambling, bad investments, the usual human foolishness. The collector gave him a choice, his life or his daughter's servitude. 10 years of service to clear the debt. Dakota listened from his position by the window, deliberately keeping distance between them. "Go on." "I had dreams once. University. I'd been accepted to study literature." A bitter smile ghosted across her lips. "Seems ridiculous now, doesn't it? A human girl thinking she deserved education. The castle taught me better. Invisibility. Silence. Survival. The bruise," Dakota prompted, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Lady Lena," Annabelle touched her cheek unconsciously. "During yesterday's breakfast service, I brought your coffee. You thanked me. You actually looked at me and said thank you." She laughed, hollow and sharp. Such a small thing, but she noticed. After the meal, she found me in the servants' corridor, said I was getting ideas above my station, that looking a vampire king in the eyes was presumption, bordering on sedition. Dakota's silence was molten rage, barely contained. "She struck me, Told me the next time you showed me any attention, she'd make sure I disappeared like Emerson. Annabelle's voice cracked. Please, my lord, don't retaliate. It will only make things worse for the others. There are 12 human servants in this castle, and we're all witnesses. The word dropped like a stone into still water. Dakota turned from the window, and Annabelle saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not anger, but anguish. You're all witnesses to crimes the nobility once buried. That's why the systematic abuse. Keep you terrified. Keep you silent. Keep you convinced that speaking up means death. It does mean death, my lord. Not anymore. He moved closer, slowly, broadcasting his intentions like she was something wild that might bolt. I'm implementing new protocols. Human servants will have protections, oversight, the right to report abuse without retaliation. The council will hate it. The nobility will fight it. I don't care. Why? The question escaped before Annabelle could stop it. We're nothing to you. Cattle. Food supply. Why would you risk political capital for... Because you asked me about my loneliness. Dakota's admission hung in the air between them. 3 nights ago, when you brought wine to my study, you asked if the crown was heavy, if I ever got tired of carrying it alone. Annabelle remembered. She'd been exhausted, her filter worn thin, and the question had slipped out before she could swallow it back. No one has asked me that in decades, Dakota continued. Everyone wants something from me. Allegiance, power, protection, blood. But you asked if I was tired, as if I was still human enough to feel exhaustion. You are. The words were whisper soft. Tired, I mean. I can see it. The way you stand apart, even in crowded rooms. The way you look at the crown like it's a cage. Dakota stood close enough now that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from him, centuries of death pressed into immortal flesh. You shouldn't see me that clearly. It's dangerous for both of us. I know. And yet you're still here. You ordered me here, my lord. Dakota. His name on his own lips sounded strange, vulnerable. When we're alone, call me Dakota. I'm tired of titles. Annabelle's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. That's not proper. Nothing about this is proper. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched the bruise Lena had left. His fingers were ice against her fevered skin. I'm sorry this happened under my roof. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You're a king. We're beneath your notice. You were never beneath my notice. The confession seemed to surprise him as much as her. From the first day you arrived, I noticed the way you move like water through rooms, the way you hum while you work when you think no one's listening, the way you treat ancient books with more reverence than most vampires show living things. Annabelle couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was madness. Tell me to stop, Dakota whispered. Tell me this is inappropriate, that I'm your king and you're my servant, that this can't. I can't. The truth ripped from her throat. Because I've been noticing you too, and that terrifies me more than anything Lena could do. The castle around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the moment that would change everything. The royal decree arrived at breakfast, delivered on parchment sealed with Dakota's personal sigil. Kavan read it aloud to the assembled council, his voice growing tighter with each word. Effective immediately. All human servants are granted protection under Crown law. Any vampire found guilty of unauthorized violence against human staff will face trial. A human representative will be appointed to hear grievances. 3 servants, Lyle, Cameron, and Princess, are hereby promoted to positions of household oversight. The silence that followed could have shattered diamonds. You cannot be serious. Lena's voice dripped venom. Giving humans authority over other humans, yes. Dakota didn't look up from his correspondence. Unless you're confessing to crimes that would require their oversight of you? Lena's face went carefully blank. The castle transformed overnight into a chessboard where every move carried lethal consequences. Dakota's reforms carved through centuries of tradition like a blade through silk. Human servants walked straighter, spoke louder, began to remember they were people rather than property, and the vampire nobility seethed. Nayeli found Dakota in the library 3 days later, her approach silent as death itself. "You're making enemies, my lord. Powerful ones." "I've had powerful enemies since I took the crown." Dakota continued scanning the ancient text before him. "What's a few more?" "These aren't enemies across borders." She settled into the chair opposite him, graceful as a cat. "These are enemies in your bed." "Well," a knowing smile, "potentially in your bed. Hard to seduce a king who's distracted by household reforms." "Is that what you were planning? Seduction?" "It's what we're all planning." Nayeli's honesty was refreshing in its brutality. 5 vampire ladies, 1 crown. We'd be fools not to use every weapon available. But you've changed the game entirely, haven't you? Now we're not competing with each other. We're competing with a human maid who looks at you like you hung the moon. Dakota's hand stilled on the book. "She doesn't. Oh, she does. And you look at her like she's the sun, and you've been living in darkness for centuries." Nayeli leaned forward. "I respect ambition, my lord. I respect power plays and political maneuvering. What I don't respect is self-destruction. That's what this is. You must know that. Then withdraw from the selection. Save yourself the disappointment." "Now why would I do that?" Her laugh was genuine. "This is the most interesting courtship in 3 centuries. I'm not missing the ending." The ending nearly came that night. Annabelle was returning to Dakota's chambers, her new assignment, her protection, her gilded cage, when the corridor lamps extinguished. All of them, simultaneously. She froze, heart hammering, every instinct screaming danger. "Little human." Danika's voice emerged from shadows that shouldn't exist. "You've caused quite the disruption." "Lady Danica." Annabelle kept her voice steady through sheer willpower. "I'm just performing my duties." "Your duties." Danica materialized from darkness itself, her beauty terrible in the dim moonlight filtering through distant windows. "Is that what you call bewitching our king? Turning him against his own kind? Making him weak?" "I haven't done anything. You exist. That's crime enough." Danica circled her like a predator. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice? That we'd simply accept a human replacing us in his affections? You're food, darling. Livestock. A snack with delusions of—" She stopped mid-sentence, nostrils flaring. "Poison." Danica's voice changed entirely. "Don't move." She blurred forward, inhumanly fast, yanking Annabelle backward, just as the floor where she'd been standing erupted in blue flame. Magical, hungry, designed to burn without leaving evidence. "Someone set a trap." Danica's eyes blazed crimson. "A very specific trap, keyed to human body heat and heartbeat. If I hadn't smelled the residue." She studied Annabelle with new assessment. "Someone wants you dead badly enough to use forbidden magic inside the castle walls." Footsteps echoed. Dakota, moving faster than thought. Deshawn close behind. "What happened?" Dakota's voice could have frozen the sun. "Assassination attempt." Danica still held Annabelle's arm, steadying her. "Sophisticated. Expensive. This wasn't some jealous noble acting on impulse. This was planned, funded, and executed by someone with access to castle schematics and dark magic. Dakota's expression went utterly cold. "Deshawn, lock down the castle. No one enters or leaves. Wake the council, and someone find me Kayvon. Now." "My lord, you can't possibly think," Deshawn began. "I don't think. I know." Dakota finally looked at Annabelle, something raw and terrible in his gaze. This was a message. Someone's telling me that my protection means nothing. That they'll kill what's mine regardless of consequences. "What's yours?" The words escaped Annabelle before she could stop them. Dakota's hand found hers. Ice against warmth. Death against life. "Yes, mine. And heaven help anyone who forgot what happens when someone takes what belongs to the Vampire King." The castle bells began to toll, deep and ominous, summoning the court to emergency council. Somewhere in the shadows, a conspirator's plan was unraveling. And somewhere deeper, a king's patience was running out. The emergency council convened in the Great Hall, where judgments had been passed for 3 centuries. Every vampire of significance stood in attendance: nobles, advisors, the 5 suitors, and conspicuously, Kayvon, whose expression carried the careful neutrality of someone with everything to hide. Dakota entered last, Annabelle at his side, a statement so shocking that several council members audibly gasped. A human, in the Great Hall, during closed proceedings. "She stays," Dakota said, before anyone could object. "Since she's the target, she has right of presence." Deshawn stepped forward, carrying a silk cloth that concealed something small. "My lord, we found the magical residue." The spell was purchased from a shadow market dealer who keeps records. He unveiled a crystal vial, still glowing faintly blue. "The buyer's signature is magically bound to the transaction." He activated the crystal. A name appeared in burning letters above it. Kayvon, Bloodsworn. The hall erupted. "Lies!" Kayvon's composure shattered. "This is fabrication, a plot to discredit me. Why would I want a human servant dead?" "Because she's not just a servant anymore." Dakota's voice cut through the chaos like an executioner's blade. "She's a symbol of change you can't control, of a king who won't be manipulated. You arranged the queen selection to install Lena, your ally, your puppet. But I became distracted. You became obsessed." Kayvon's mask fell completely. "With a human, a creature that lives and dies in an eye blink. You're making us weak, making us look foolish before the other vampire kingdoms. Our court has become a laughingstock because our king can't distinguish between a potential queen and livestock." The word, livestock, hung in the air like a curse. Dakota moved with speed that made even ancient vampires flinch. One moment he stood beside Annabelle. The next, his hand was around Kayvon's throat, lifting him off the ground. "Say it again." Dakota's voice was death itself. "Call her livestock again. I want to hear you justify your execution." Kayvon's eyes bulged, but his tongue was poisoned to the last. "You're not fit to rule." "You're right." Dakota's smile was terrible. "A fit ruler would have you executed immediately. A fit ruler wouldn't hesitate. But I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to let you live, stripped of title, lands, and position. You'll exist at the mercy of the very humans you've tortured. Let's see how long your superiority lasts." He released Kayvon, who crumpled to the marble floor, gasping. "As for the rest of you," Dakota turned to face the assembled court. "I'm tired of pretending. Tired of playing games where humans are pieces instead of people. So here's my decree. and you can accept it or challenge me for the crown right now. Human servants are under my personal protection. Anyone who harms them answers to me. Anyone who plots against them commits treason. Anyone who questions this can leave my court immediately." Silence. Then, "I'll stay." Donika's voice surprised everyone, including herself. "Not because I agree with you, but because a king who'd burn his own court for a principle is, well, that's actual strength. Twisted, possibly insane strength, but strength nonetheless." Nayeli nodded slowly. "I withdraw from the selection, not out of protest. I simply recognize when I've lost. Good luck, my lord. You'll need it." Avery remained neutral, calculating. Lena stood beside her father's political corpse, face white with fury. "This isn't over," Lena hissed. "You think protecting one human makes you noble? You're a fool, and fools don't keep crowns long." "Then come for mine." Dakota's invitation was genuine. "Please, I'm eager to demonstrate what happens to those who threaten what's mine." But the real confrontation came later, in the shadowed corridors out from witnesses. Annabelle was walking back from Dakota's chambers. She'd been dismissed during the council's formal sentencing, when she heard her name whispered from an alcove. "Annabelle." She turned. Lena stood there, and she wasn't alone. 2 human servants flanked her, Aaron and Berenice, both hollow-eyed and trembling. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Lena's smile was a blade. "Kayvon was careless, but I'm not. Your precious king can protect you in public. But here, in the dark, you're just meat that breathes." She nodded, and the 2 humans moved forward. Annabelle saw the silver blades in their hands, saw the tears streaming down Aaron's face. "I'm sorry," Aaron whispered. "She has my daughter. She said if I don't, do it," Lena commanded, "or Princess dies tonight." The blade rose. Annabelle closed her eyes, and the world exploded. Dakota materialized from shadow itself, moving with speed that defied physics. He caught Aaron's wrist mid-strike, disarmed her with surgical precision, then placed himself between Annabelle and everyone else. What emerged wasn't the politician king or the careful ruler. This was the predator beneath, the ancient thing that had survived centuries through violence and will. His eyes blazed crimson, his fangs extended fully. The temperature dropped 30 degrees. "You touched what's mine." His voice came from somewhere primal and terrible. "Threatened her, terrorized innocents, used children as hostages." Lena's confidence faltered. "You wouldn't dare. I am so far past dare." Dakota's smile was nightmare fuel. "Deshawn!" His advisor appeared with guards. "My lord." "Take Lena to the dungeons. Strip her of title and name. She wanted to see humans elevated. She can spend the next decade serving them." He turned to Aaron and Berenice. "You two, where is Princess being held?" The Eastern Tower, my lord," Berenice sobbed. "Please, we didn't want—" "I know. Go with the guards. Bring Princess here. You're all under crown protection now." As they scrambled away, Dakota finally turned to Annabelle. The monster receded, leaving only a man who'd just revealed exactly how far he'd go. "Did she hurt you?" Annabelle shook her head, unable to speak. "Good." He pulled her close. "Propriety be damned. Witnesses be damned. Everything be damned. Because if she had, there wouldn't be enough of her left to imprison." And Annabelle realized with crystal clarity, she'd fallen in love with a vampire king who would burn his entire kingdom to keep her safe. The question was whether either of them would survive that love. The formal queen selection ceremony had been planned for months, a spectacle of vampire nobility, ancient ritual, and political theater designed to cement alliances and display power. The great hall glittered with 1,000 candles, their flames casting dancing shadows across marble columns that had witnessed centuries of coronations, executions, and everything between. Every vampire house of significance attended. Nobles traveled from distant territories, drawn by curiosity and the promise of witnessing history. The remaining suitors, Danica, Avery, and Kayvon's niece, whose presence now felt like cruel irony, stood on the raised dais in gowns worth kingdoms, each a vision of immortal beauty and calculated ambition. Dakota entered in full ceremonial regalia, black velvet and silver threading, the crown of his ancestors heavy on his head, every inch the vampire king his court expected. Deshawn walked 3 steps behind, carrying the traditional binding ribbons that would tie the chosen queen to her king. Annabelle watched from the servants' gallery, hidden among the humans, allowed to witness but never participate. Her heart felt like it was tearing itself apart. In the 3 weeks since the attack, she and Dakota had existed in careful limbo, stolen conversations, charged silences, a connection growing deeper despite every law of nature screaming. It was impossible. But tonight was reality. Tonight, Dakota would choose a queen from among his own kind, and Annabelle would return to being what she'd always been: invisible, insignificant, a footnote in someone else's story. The ceremony master's voice rang out. Lord Dakota of the Crimson Court, King of the Eastern Territories, Master of the ancient bloodlines, the time has come to select your queen. Choose wisely, for this choice binds not just hearts, but kingdoms. Dakota ascended the dais, stood before the 3 remaining candidates. The entire hall held its breath. He looked at Danica, strong, pragmatic, a warrior queen who'd never show weakness. He looked at Avery, brilliant, strategic, capable of running an empire with ruthless efficiency. He looked at the 3rd suitor, whose name he still couldn't remember. Then he turned away from all of them. I choose none of you. The words dropped like stones into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the assembled court. My lord, the ceremony master sputtered. The ritual requires. The ritual requires. I choose a queen. I will. But not from these candidates. Dakota descended the dais, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. He walked past rows of vampire nobility, past council members whose faces registered disbelief, past everything his world said was acceptable. He walked to the servants' gallery. The crowd parted like a sea before a storm. Whispers erupted, scandalized, furious, shocked. Dakota stopped before Annabelle, who stared at him with eyes that reflected every emotion rioting through his chest. This is madness, she whispered. You'll lose everything. I've already lost everything that matters if I lose you. He extended his hand. Come down here, please. Dakota, I know what I'm asking. I know what it costs. His voice carried now, filling the hall, ensuring every vampire heard. I'm asking you to stand beside me when the entire world says you shouldn't exist in my orbit. I'm asking you to trust that love, impossible, forbidden, absolutely insane love, is stronger than centuries of tradition. Tears streamed down Annabelle's face. They'll destroy you for this. Let them try. His hand remained extended. I've been a king for 50 years. I've been lonely for all of them. I've worn this crown like a cage, played politics like chess, treated duty like religion, and I was slowly turning into something cold and dead inside. His voice softened. Then you asked if I ever got tired. Such a simple question, but it reminded me I was still capable of feeling anything at all. The hall erupted in protest. Council members shouted objections. Danica laughed, a sound of genuine, delighted chaos. Avery simply shook her head, already calculating the political fallout. "This is unprecedented!" a council elder roared. "Ancient law forbids." "Then I'm rewriting ancient law." Dakota's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I am your king, not because of bloodline or tradition, but because I've held this throne through strength and will. If anyone disputes my right to choose my own queen, human, vampire, or otherwise, challenge me now. Take the crown by force. I'm waiting." Silence. Heavy, dangerous. No one moved. Dakota's gaze never left Annabelle. "I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise they'll accept you. I can't promise we won't face enemies and obstacles that would break lesser loves. But I can promise I will fight for you with everything I am. I will protect you with my last breath. I will choose you over crowns and kingdoms and every law written in the dark." Annabelle's hand trembled as she reached for his. The moment their fingers touched, something shifted. Fundamental, irreversible. History pivoting on a single choice. She descended from the gallery, crossed the floor to stand beside him. Two figures impossibly different, immortal and mortal, king and servant, death and life, facing a court that had gone utterly, breathlessly silent. "I don't know how to be a queen," Annabelle whispered. "Good. Because I need you to teach me how to be human again." Dakota turned to face the assembly, Annabelle's hand firmly in his. "I present to you the woman who will stand beside me, not as property, not as livestock, as my equal, my chosen, my beloved." "This is treason against your own kind," someone shouted. "No, this is evolution." Dakota's voice carried absolute conviction. "We've ruled through fear and hierarchy for centuries. Perhaps it's time we learn to rule through something else, something stronger." Deshawn stepped forward, surprising everyone. "I stand with my king, and his choice." Then, impossibly, Danica moved. She descended from the dais and knelt, not in submission, but in respect. "You're absolutely mad, my lord, but I've always preferred madness to mediocrity. I'll support this. Gods help us all." Others followed. Not all. Many stormed out, furious and betrayed, but enough remained. Enough to matter. The ceremony master, flustered beyond measure, finally stammered. This is highly irregular. The human cannot be crowned queen. The laws, then we'll change them." Dakota's hand tightened around Annabelle's. "I don't claim her as queen tonight. I claim her as beloved, under my protection, with the promise that I will move heaven and darkness itself to change the laws that separate us. This is not the end of the ceremony. It's the beginning of something new." He turned to Annabelle, and the entire Crimson Court witnessed something they'd never seen. Their vampire king, who'd ruled with cold precision for 5 decades, look at a human maid like she was the only light in eternal darkness. "I love you," he said simply, "and I will spend however many centuries I have making sure you never regret saying yes to this impossible thing." Annabelle smiled through tears. "I already said yes, when I took your hand, when I walked down here, when I chose you over safety." The hall remained silent, not in anger now, but in awe. witnessing the moment immortal law began to bend before mortal love, watching a king choose his heart over his crown, even knowing it might cost him everything. Dakota raised their joined hands high. Let it be known, from this night forward, Annabelle is under crown protection. She is mine, I am hers, and anyone who threatens this answers to me, and whatever allies remain loyal to a king who remembers what it means to feel. The silence stretched. Then Deshawn began a slow clap. Danica joined. Others followed. Not all, but enough. And in the servants' gallery, humans who'd lived in fear and invisibility for years watched one of their own stand beside a vampire king, proving that impossible things could happen. That love could survive when the entire world was designed to crush it. That sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion was simply choosing to be seen. The ceremony ended not with traditional celebration, but with Dakota and Annabelle leaving hand in hand, walking through a court divided and uncertain, but forever changed. Tomorrow would bring new battles, council members to convince, laws to rewrite, enemies who would never accept this union. But tonight, in the ancient Crimson Court, where vampire kings had ruled with cold authority for centuries, something warm and impossible had taken root. And the entire castle, supporters and enemies alike, remained silent, processing the shock of a king who'd chosen love over everything else. The end of the beginning. 3 months later, the Crimson Court had transformed in ways both subtle and seismic. Dakota stood at his chamber window watching dawn approach, something he'd done for centuries, but now with company. Annabelle slept in his bed, curled beneath blankets that cost more than her family's debt, her breathing the only sound in the quiet room. He'd learned her rhythms, the way she talked in her sleep sometimes, fragments of dreams about libraries and freedom, the way she reached for him in darkness, seeking warmth his body could never provide. The changes had come with blood and resistance. 5 council members resigned in protest, calling him traitor to his kind. 2 minor vampire houses severed alliances, declaring the Crimson Court compromised by human influence. There were assassination attempts, 3 in the first month alone, each more sophisticated than the last. But there were victories too. The human protection laws held. Lyle, Cameron, and Princess now oversaw a staff that no longer flinched at shadows. Complaints were investigated. Justice, however imperfect, existed where before there'd been only silence. Erin's daughter was safe, reunited with her mother, both serving in positions that offered dignity rather than terror. Lena remained imprisoned, stripped of everything. Kayvon had fled to distant territories, his name poison in the court. The conspirators had learned a lesson written in consequences. The Vampire King's protection was absolute. Danica had become an unexpected ally, not out of affection, but pragmatic respect for strength. "You're still mad," she'd told Dakota last week. "But effective madness is better than weak sanity. I'll support your reforms. Someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally start a civil war." Avery departed peacefully, accepting a position in the northern courts where tradition still meant something. "I hope it works," she'd said to Annabelle before leaving. "Truly, you've done what no vampire in history managed, made him remember he has a heart." The remaining suitor, whose name Dakota had finally learned was Kenna, withdrew quietly, relieved to escape the political maelstrom. But the hardest battle wasn't fought in council chambers or through political maneuvering. It was fought in moments like these, when Dakota watched Annabelle sleep and calculated time with the precision of someone who had too much of it. She would age. 30 years, if fortune smiled. 50 if she was exceptionally lucky. She would grow old while he remained frozen, eternal, unchanging. He would watch her die. The thought carved through him like silver through flesh. "You're brooding again." Annabelle's voice, sleep rough and warm, pulled him from dark thoughts. "I can feel it from here." "I'm contemplating." He didn't turn from the window. "That's just fancy brooding." She sat up, blankets pooling around her waist. "Come here." He obeyed, sitting beside her, and she immediately pressed against his side. Warm life against cold death, mortal heartbeat against immortal stillness. "Talk to me," she commanded softly. "Time," he admitted. "I'm thinking about how little you have, and how much I have. About what happens when I'm old and wrinkled, and you still look like you could model for sculptures." She tilted her head against his shoulder. "I think about it too, every day. But Dakota..." She took his hand, placed it over her heart where life pulsed strong and steady. "I'd rather have 30 real years with you than 300 empty ones with anyone else. That's not enough time." "It never is. That's what makes it precious." She turned to face him fully. "Humans understand something vampires forget. Everything ends. That's not tragedy. That's what makes moments matter. Every breakfast where you pretend to eat human food to make me laugh. Every evening when you read to me because my eyes get tired. Every time you look at me like I'm something miraculous instead of ordinary. Those moments matter because they're finite. You're not ordinary." His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone where Lena's bruise had long since faded. "You never were. Neither are you. A vampire king who chose love over law? Who rewrote centuries of tradition because someone asked if he was tired?" She smiled. "That's a story worth telling. That's a love worth having, however long or short." Dawn broke fully, and Dakota should have retreated from the windows. Sunlight and vampires mixed poorly. But he stayed, Annabelle in his arms, watching the world wake. "I've been researching," he said quietly. "Ancient texts, forbidden magic. There are rumors of ways to extend human life, to transform." "No." Her voice was gentle, but absolute. "I won't become vampire. That's not the answer. Annabelle, listen to me." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "If I become like you, I stop being what you love. I become eternal, cold, unchanging. The girl who asked if you were tired? She exists because she's human, because she knows what it means to be fragile and brave anyway. So, I'm just supposed to watch you die? You're supposed to love me while I'm alive." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Really love me. Not the idea of me. Not some immortal version you could create. Me. Flawed and mortal and temporary. Can you do that?" The question hung between them, weighted with impossible choices. Finally, Dakota pulled her close, burying his face in her hair that smelled like lavender and humanity. "Yes. Gods help me. Yes. I'll love you for however long the universe gives us. And when you're gone," his voice cracked, "I'll carry you with me. Every moment, every laugh, every time you made me feel like something other than a crown and a title. That's all I ask." She held him as tightly as mortal strength allowed. "Love me now, fiercely, completely, without holding back because you're afraid of loss. That's how humans love, like we're running out of time. Because we are." They stayed that way as dawn painted the room gold. A vampire king and a human maid who'd rewritten the rules of their world through sheer stubborn affection. Outside, the Crimson Court continued its transformation. Human servants walked with heads high. New laws were drafted. Old traditions crumbled and rebuilt into something better, stranger, more hopeful. Inside, two people who shouldn't exist together held each other against the inevitable march of time. "I love you," Dakota whispered into her hair. "I know." Annabelle smiled against his chest. "You chose me in front of everyone. Kind of hard to miss. I'd choose you again, in every lifetime, every circumstance, every impossible scenario. Good thing I only have one lifetime then. Saves time on dramatic declarations." He laughed, genuine, surprised, the sound of someone remembering joy. "How do you do that? Make tragedy feel like comedy?" "Human superpower. We have to laugh or we'd never stop crying." She pulled back, cupping his face in warm hands. "Now stop brooding about the future and come back to bed. We have right now, and I plan to use it extremely well." Is that a royal command? From the woman who has a vampire king wrapped around her finger? Absolutely. Dakota let himself be pulled back into warmth, into life, into the present moment he'd spent centuries racing past. Outside, the world held dangers and uncertainties, and enemies who'd never accept them. But here, now, in the space they'd carved from impossible circumstances, there was only love. Fierce, finite, absolutely worth every consequence. The Crimson Court had witnessed many things in its long history. Wars, coronations, executions, alliances forged and broken. But it had never witnessed this, a vampire king learning to be mortal in the ways that mattered, loving someone who would leave him far too soon, and counting every moment as treasure instead of tragedy. Annabelle fell back asleep in his arms, her heartbeat a countdown clock he'd learned to cherish rather than fear. And Dakota held her close, this impossible woman who'd asked if he was tired and then taught him how to rest. The future would come with all its pain and loss, but for now, for this precious, fleeting now, they had each other. And that was enough. The end. Thanks for staying with me till the end. I really appreciate you. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. And let me know what you learned from this story and where you're watching from in the comments.